Welcome back to another edition of Field Stormers, episode 4. We are going on week 8 of college football. As always, I am your host, Mo Murphy, with my co-host, Walker Bailey, in the building. Walker, how you doing today?
Good. Big slate tomorrow. It's hard to follow up last weekend's slate, but we have a lot of games tomorrow that have an opportunity to do the same thing. So looking forward to diving in and talking about it.
Yeah, and speaking of last weekend's slate, which, man, probably was it's going to be tough to top that as a weekend, but if you want to hear our thoughts on that, we joined our guy Jeff Hunt on Jeff Needs Sports. So make sure you go check out his episode from this past week with his college football preview. Spent about an hour, 15 minutes previewing the Tennessee upset, the landscape of college football right now, Oklahoma State losing, all those games that were big time last weekend. We covered that on Jeff's show. So make sure you check out Jeff Needs Sports to hear our thoughts on that. We're going to dive straight into this weekend. Obviously, it's a late start for us as far as us recording here on a Friday. Typically, we get middle of the week. Schedules got a little tied up, but what we weren't going to do was cancel Field Stormers altogether because this is your weekly college football show at Off the Ball Network. So, first matchup we're going to talk about. We're not going to spend a lot of time on these first two matchups. Just, we never get to talk about my team because we haven't had a premier matchup. Coming off a bye week, Ohio State at home versus Iowa, 30.5-point favorites. Walker, before I go on my little minute and a half spill, what do you think about this game?
I just think it's a game that Ohio State needs to play well and win. I know that that's kind of like bland and it just is what it is, but that's really all that they can do. Their strength of schedule is what it is, and it's not their faults necessarily, but you play who you play, and so you just have to line up and win, and if they win, it takes care of itself. I think that Ohio State fans will be nitpicky and look for certain things and play, but really all that matters is playing well and finding a way to win. They should win this one rather handily. I don't think Iowa can do anything offensively that will allow them to keep up in this game. So if Ohio State plays well offensively, they should win this one by 4 scores. It's just one of those games where you just want to see them play well and get the W. That's really all that you can do in these games, because nothing that Ohio State does on Saturday for me is going to alter, unless they lose, is going to alter how I feel about them moving forward.
Yeah, for me, it's just one of those, you could say, anybody can say what they want. This is the first real test Ohio State's offense is going to have. This is basically the number 7 defense in college football in Iowa. If you look at their statistics, number 1 in giving up big plays. They don't give up big plays. They lead all of college football in the lack of giving up big plays, I guess you will say. They got a top-notch run defense, a top pass defense. So this is the best defense probably Ohio State's going to face all the way up until Michigan. And even right now, numbers-wise, Iowa's defense has been better than Michigan's. But, like you said, this isn't necessarily the premier matchup. Strength of schedule is what it is. You can say that about Michigan as well, but we all know, this season, that's the game that matters. Ohio State, Michigan can handle business because we know it's going to come down to the game in rivalry week. But what I'm looking for at Ohio State, I'm looking more on the defensive side. Iowa, as much as their defense is one of the best defenses in college football, they literally have one of the worst offenses in college football. They weren't able to basically score on anybody. They held Michigan for a little bit. Michigan's talent just prevailed. Obviously, I didn't think Michigan was going to lose that game. It's just Iowa does have a stifling defense. I think the lack of creativity for Michigan at times is what may take longer to pull away. But I'm looking at Ohio State's defense. I think defensively, we have to practically shut them out. Like you said, we said this pre-show, you said it. If they score double digits and it's not off of bonehead mistake that Ohio State made to kind of give them a short field, and I was marching down Ohio State, to me, how am I supposed to take them serious as national title contenders, knowing that this is the weakest offense we will play all season, no matter who's left on our schedule, let alone when I'm looking at everyone in the top 10, top 15 as far as contenders, every single one of them who we could match up against in the college football playoffs, if that's where we end up, offense is 10 times better than Iowa. So I'm just focused on Ohio State's defense. I think our offense is going to take care of itself. We got a lot of players coming back from injury. Jackson Smith-Njigba is expected to play. Both running backs are expected to be healthy. Some of the guys hurt on defense are ready to go. We needed that bye week to kind of handle business for the second half of the season. So I think we're heading in the direction of being in full strength over the next couple of weeks. We'll be as close as we've been all year for this Iowa game. So that's all I'm looking forward to. I'm looking at our defense, and obviously just having not seen Ohio State play in 2 weeks, obviously I'm excited to wake up and be able to see Ohio State play 12 p.m. Eastern kickoff at home against Iowa. So we'll move on, talk about your team real quick. I'll give my thoughts first, pass it over to you. Ole Miss plays LSU on the road at 2:30 Central Time, so 3:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. LSU's favored in this game. Little weird, right? But I think what Vegas, and I guess it's based on Vegas, but I think what it's seeing is Ole Miss has had enough close calls. It's kind of like with that Bama situation. Like, even though Bama was still favored over Tennessee, they probably, if they had blown out everybody that they were supposed to, they probably come into that game 17-point favorites, 14.5 points. I think Ole Miss has had so many close calls that in a hostile environment against a team who's a good team, their LSU isn't great, but they're pretty good. They've coughed up a couple. They got a couple quality wins, especially for an LSU team. They're good. They're well coached. I value Brian Kelly. Walker, I know you value Brian Kelly as a really good coach. So they're well coached, and they've come into their own, and they're starting to play better football. So I can see why they're favored it, because Vegas kind of predicting that this is the one. Ole Miss has had a couple close calls, a couple performances where they could have played better. And if that's the same case against LSU with the way LSU is playing right now, the expectation could be that Ole Miss loses in a close one. I don't foresee that. I think this is a close game, and you see unranked versus number 7, and you're like, oh, there's no way this should be a close game. It'll be an indictment on Ole Miss if they don't handle business. But Walker, as you and I know as avid college football fans and covering the sport, we know that's not the case, but your casual will see unranked versus number 7. How are they even favored? Ole Miss is overrated. They must suck, or whatever it may be. I'm taking Ole Miss in a close one, but I wouldn't be surprised if LSU plays just the way they're winning. Jaden Daniels, leading passer, obviously playing quarterback. He is their leading rusher, which always gets a little concerning to me, especially watching him play. He likes to run first a lot of times, but he's progressing, and he's playing a lot better as of the past couple weeks. So, Walker, throw it over to you since we're talking about your team. Ole Miss versus LSU, Ole Miss on the road. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I had Ole Miss 9-3 preseason, and this was one of the 3. It's just Death Valley is such a difficult place to win, and I feel like I'm kind of setting up, a loss as for Ole Miss. But like, if you want to be taken seriously as one of the top 10 to 12 programs nationally, when LSU is down the way they're down, you have to go in there and win. I mean, you're not going to have to deal with the nighttime environment. You're playing at 2:30. You have to go in there and win. It's a game that. I'll be curious to see how Ole Miss handles the environment, because they haven't really played a road game yet. Like, they played at Georgia Tech, but that doesn't really count. So I'll be curious to see how Ole Miss handles the environment. If you want to be taken seriously, it's a game you have to win. I think Ole Miss is going to win. I would guess that Ole Miss has a lot of success running the football. But, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is going to come down to how Ole Miss plays defensively. And if it's a close game, then how does Jackson Dart handle the pressure of a road environment and making important plays with his arm when he has to? So we'll see. I'm pretty anxious about it. It was one of the 3 I had as an L preseason. I'm not going to back off of that now per se, but I do feel more confident in Ole Miss now than I did preseason. So we'll see. To me, it's a game that Ole Miss either goes in and wins by 2 scores, or they lose a close one. I don't think LSU can blow Ole Miss out. I don't think, but I also think that if it's a close game, that I'll trust the environment and just trust that LSU makes 1 or 2 more plays at home. I think if Ole Miss wins, they go in there and kind of command it from start to finish.
Yeah, 100%. So now we're going to move on to some of the big time matchups. We got to talk about our teams a little bit. Ole Miss playing in a more premier matchup, obviously, than Ohio State, even based on the fact Ole Miss is coming into this game as underdogs. Texas versus Oklahoma State. Quinn Ewers, who essentially coming back from injury, is playing well, was playing well pre-injury. Obviously, we know he got hurt in that Bama game. We know how we feel about Texas if Quinn Ewers never gets hurt in that Bama game. And Spencer Sanders, bro, he's been balling. Like, he's been balling. I know they're fresh off a loss, but he still played really well. I think Oklahoma State basically gave up that game. Last week, they had a comfortable lead. Not too comfortable that's unreasonable to come back from, but they were kind of up. It kind of I won't say dominating, but doing what needed to be done for them to come out with the W. And then TCU obviously just did what they do, play out of their minds. You've been buying into them all year. So anybody who's been listening knows, and anybody who, listens to Up in Flames and knows, Walker said this even before the season. He was big on TCU, but I think this is a big time matchup. What? Texas is on the road against Oklahoma State. They're favored by 6.5, I think. Last time I looked, 6.5.
6.5, depending on where you shop.
Yeah. So, that half a point can make a difference on how you decide to bet them. But this game, I think, this is huge. I mean, any Big 12 game right now, and there's another one that we'll cover here in a second. But the Big 12 has been really interesting, really entertaining, and been playing very good football. And that goes for Texas and Oklahoma State. And whether you think Texas could win out or not, they are a team that is capable of doing that with a tough road ahead of them. And this is one of those games. Like, this is one of those tough games on the road ahead of them of basically trying to make a Big 12 title appearance. But with the way Quinn Ewers is playing, I think I have to lean on Texas, bro. I think, I'm sipping the Kool-Aid with Texas right now. I won't say they're completely back, but at the same time, I very well could see them having been undefeated had Quinn Ewers never got hurt. Because if they beat Bama, I don't think they would have turned. Like, I don't think they lose to Texas Tech with Quinn Ewers playing. And I know those are huge what ifs, but if a team loses their quarterback and they still play it close and had an opportunity of winning, I think it's a safe assessment to walk away from that game and it'd be like, I feel like if they had their starting quarterback, they get the job done and get the W. It's not like Texas got blown out by Bama, took a game-winning field goal. They lost by a touchdown to Texas Tech. So I think with the way they've been playing offensively as well, and that defensive performance against Oklahoma was outstanding. But the way they've been playing offensively with Quinn Ewers since he's been back, I think it's safe to assume that this two-loss team very well could be undefeated and one of the top 5 teams in the country. So I'm going Texas. Walker, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I like Texas. I think that with Oklahoma State, you have to worry about them losing the TCU game twice. One of those things where you go on the road in a massive matchup as an underdog and you control the game from, opening kickoff until about 5 minutes left in the game. And then you get into overtime and you lose it. And a lot of times, we forget that these are human beings and kids, and we're not going to see just level emotions from game 1 to game 12. And so a lot of times we kind of see teams lose games twice, and we've seen it a few times this year across the country with high ranked teams. And so I'm kind of worried. I know it's at home and it's going to be a hostile environment for Texas to go into. But Spencer Sanders is banged up. We'll see. I expect him to go, but he's banged up. It's a shoulder injury, which is never good for a quarterback. But we'll see. I expect Texas to go in there and kind of handle business. I think Texas and TCU are kind of a cut above in the Big 12 right now. I kind of expect that that's what we're getting in the Big 12 championship game. At least I hope it is. That's what I want. But yeah, so I expect TCU to go in there, or TCU. I expect Texas to go in there and handle business, take care of Oklahoma State, and just keep this thing moving.
Yeah, I mean, the same expectation. Because they have 2 losses, we can't say Texas is back, but I'll tell you, they look pretty damn good for set up for next year. Like the unfortunate injury, I will say Texas looked pretty well set up for next year, knowing that Quinn Ewers is it's going to be between him and Caleb Williams, like Ewers and Williams going to be the Stroud and Bryce Young the next year is what it seems like as far as who's going to be the top quarterback coming out of college football. So Texas definitely has a bright future. It looks like Sarkisian finally has figured some things out. They got players everywhere. They got some solid guys on defense. And something about this Texas team that we haven't been able to say in a while is they got multiple guys on both sides of the ball that'll probably go to the NFL draft, which we have not said that about Texas. And it's been some years where we really feel safe on, like, especially when we say day 1 or day 2, where they got a couple guys who could go in that first round. And if not, they're going to have a plethora of guys going in that second and third round. So, I mean, this is one of the most talented Texas teams we've seen in a while. And Sarkisian seems to have figured it out. And with knowing that he has a quarterback this year and next year, I think it could be a little scary for the Big 12 with the way Texas is playing and the way, Quinn Ewers went from he didn't look great in that first game to looking absolutely amazing against Alabama. And he looked like Jesus on cleats. And that's what everybody basically had him as coming out of high school. So keeping it in the Big 12, Kansas State versus your beloved TCU Horned Frogs. So for everybody listening, for everybody at home, Walker is not a TCU fan. He is an Ole Miss fan, straight out of Mississippi, but Walker takes interest based on betting, and Walker bet a preseason bet that TCU wins the Big 12. He loved the odds. He loved the fact of how they would look, probably look a little bit better than you expected. But at the end of the day, if your Horned Frog mascot hat came in, you would be wearing it on this show, trying to talk and breathe through that while we're covering this game. So Kansas State versus TCU, because these are your beloved Horned Frogs, I go. I think TCU handles business in this game. Kansas State offense kind of scares me. Adrian Martinez has been playing well, but I just don't think they're explosive enough. I think TCU is able to make enough stops. Now, granted, they've been in shootouts in their big games outside of blowing out Oklahoma. Like, their big games, even with Oklahoma State, they put up a lot of points, gave up a lot of offense. But I think Kansas State offense isn't what Oklahoma State's offense is, particularly. So Adrian Martinez has been playing really well after transferring. He looks like an adequate quarterback. Looks like he should have probably made that move to transfer 2 years ago. He's probably 2 years too late as far as trying to turn himself into what we would consider an NFL prospect. But as far as for a college quarterback, he's been playing very, very solid. It looks like a totally different quarterback than what we've seen at Nebraska under Scott Frost. But TCU's just rolling right now. And it's tough for me to think that TCU's going to do anything different. They're at home, which to me is a big deal as well. Is like TCU at home. This is a night game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a night game. So I think, when TCU is really good, Walker, take it over.
It's a blackout. It's a blackout on Saturday. We got it's gonna be fans are gonna be wearing all black. TCU dropped the all black unis, so it's gonna be a hostile environment. To be honest, though, it's a spot that really scares me for TCU. Like, I don't love the matchup. Kansas State's really good defensively, which kind of means that the best units are going to be going up against each other. Kansas State's defense, it's going to be a matchup problem for TCU. So TCU, if they win here, they can pretty much lock themselves into the spot, or lock themselves into a Big 12 championship spot. If they lose, then we're talking about potentially opening the door to not making it. So it's a game that you have to win if you're TCU. Kansas State's coming off a bye. I don't love the fact that we're going to give Kleiman extra time to prepare for this Sonny Dykes offense, but it's the hand they've been dealt, so they have to deal. I mean, they're going to have to deal with that. So I'm going to take TCU in a close one. I don't feel great about it. I can't. I have to go down with the ship. We have to go down with the ship there. So I'm going to take TCU. Mo had to take a phone call, so it's just going to be me here for a second. UCLA and Oregon, 2:30, I believe ABC. 2:30 on Fox. Total set at 70.5. This is interesting. UCLA off a bye, going to Oregon. Everybody's kind of fallen in love with Chip. Chip's returning to Eugene. And for Oregon, they've been on a roll. They've kind of obliterated everybody in their path since the loss to Georgia. They've kind of reminded people, hey, look, we're still a really talented team. They beat a pretty decent BYU team by a lot of points. Hung 70 on some FCS opponents. They won a tricky road spot against Washington State. So it's an interesting matchup from a conference standpoint, because it's almost like who's going to take control atop the Pac-12 alongside USC. I know Utah beat USC last week. I'm still giving USC the benefit of the doubt there. I've come away more impressed with them actually in that game than I did I'm higher on them coming out than I was going in. So I actually like Oregon here. I like Oregon, not big, but I like Oregon by a touchdown to 10 points. Bo Nix has been actually really good at Oregon. I mean, and when you put Bo Nix in big spots at home, he tends to make plays happen. We watched that throughout his entire career at Auburn. So I like him here. I think they can take advantage of UCLA's defense a little bit. I don't think it's going to be just a super, super high. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. It's 70.5, but I don't think we're going over that. I think both teams are going to be able to have success running the football, which is exactly, I think, where Chip Kelly wants to live with Charbonnet and DTR. So I think UCLA maybe commits 1 or 2 turnovers that end up costing him this one. I like Oregon. And we'll kind of go like 38-27, somewhere in that range. So that's kind of where I feel on that one. Yeah, and I think that, and then Syracuse Clemson will kind of close out here. Syracuse Clemson, biggest game in Syracuse football history, potentially, maybe 30 to 35 years. Going to Clemson, playing in Death Valley. Dino Babers has had a lot of success coaching against Dabo Swinney. I think they've covered the spread 4 of their last 5 matchups against Clemson. Clemson favored by 13.5, depending where you look. It's going to be one of those things where I'm not really sure how Syracuse is going to score. Syracuse's offense is pretty reliant on running the football successfully to set up other things. And I like to say this about Garrett Schrader. Syracuse's quarterback, he takes some of the worst sacks you'll ever see. Just sacks that should be losses of 5 that turn into 12. And I just think that if you have that type of stuff happen on the road against Clemson, then you're going to be in a hard spot. Clemson already thrives against opponents that run the football really well. But there's just something about this game that feels weird to me. From a matchup standpoint, Clemson should be able to take advantage and just absolutely thrive. But I think Babers, maybe with some play action stuff, is going to have some stuff cooked up to keep this one close into the fourth quarter. Clemson's going to win the game. I think it's going to be relatively close, though. I think Syracuse comes out of this one feeling pretty good. I'm not just a super buyer on Clemson's offense. I think that they're better because DJU has been better. But Clemson should win. This is a game. If you're Clemson, then it's just fire alarms everywhere. It's massive issues. I'm going to take Clemson. I'll take Clemson. We'll go 24-17. I think they'll 24-17. Dino does enough to keep it close and put some points on the board and give themselves a chance to win. But Clemson does just enough to win the game. So I think that's going to wrap it for me here. We'll see if we get Mo back. He had some work stuff that kind of popped in out of nowhere that he had to take care of. That's right. Yeah, we've got to go upset alert. So Mo, I don't know who Mo is taking. I'd give it to you if I had it. I don't have it. So my upset alert this week, Penn State's got a whiteout in Happy Valley. I don't particularly care. I like Minnesota in the spot. They're getting 4.5. I like them to win outright. I don't like the way Penn State looked physically against that Michigan team last week. They're probably a little bit beat up anyways, and the only thing Minnesota does particularly well is run the football straight at you. Mo Ibrahim is going to be back, which is a massive get for Minnesota. I think that they're going to be able to run the football successfully against Penn State, which will allow them to control the clock, and it's going to keep this game close all the way until the end. I like PJ Fleck's bunch just to make one more play. They don't throw it a bunch, and I don't love Tanner Morgan, but I trust him more than I trust Sean Clifford in a close game. You would think Penn State would get a home field bump here, and maybe they do, but I trust Minnesota more. It's a team with a lot of veteran players that's won a lot of big games. So I like the Gophers in this spot to go into Happy Valley, pull off the upset, and kind of send the Big Ten into a frenzy heading into Ohio State, Penn State next week, and just kind of solidify what we already knew, which is that Ohio State and Michigan are the class of the Big Ten, and that we are on a collision course for the game at the end of the year in Columbus with Ohio State and Michigan. So that's going to wrap it here for us at Field Stormers. Mo had to dip out. That's just kind of unexpected, but we kind of have to roll with the punches here sometimes. And So it's a short episode this week, but looking forward to everything tomorrow. Make sure to check out everything at offtheballnetwork.com. I'll have some writing stuff up later today on the site, as well as every other piece of content in sports that you could want. You can find it at offtheballnetwork.com. NBA season started a few days ago, and all of our guys are all of our guys there have you covered with that sport. Not me particularly, but there's a lot of other guys that are talking hoops and handling that. I know that our president, Chris LeBron, just dropped a Knicks podcast maybe 30 minutes ago. So if you're a Knicks person, go listen to that. If you want further college football content, make sure to go check out Jeff Hunt at Jeff Needs Sports. We'll do he'll have his weekend recaps Sunday or Monday, and then we'll have ranking shows Tuesday, and then we'll hopefully follow that with Field Stormers again next Wednesday and be back on our regular schedule. You can follow me at Walker Bailey 818 on Twitter. I'm just kind of all over the place with my sports stuff. We'll have baseball content today, and then more college football content. If you want to go follow my other co-host, go follow him at Mo_Cheese15. And he's kind of the same way. So from me and Mo at Field Stormers, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.